My name is Catherine Hewitt and I work for Gateway Family Services, and I'm joined by my colleague Louisa Martin, who is going to talk a little bit about the portal, because Louisa is one of our staff who is day in, day out processing applications. And I was just saying to Louisa, we're really pleased because we've now done about 200 in the space of, I think it's about 7 days. Anyway, right, let me just go to share my screen. So if I just whiz through this document with you, it's just got a few things in it that I think would be useful. So this is the second tranche of money. I mean, the purposes of the money are pretty much the same. It comes from central government. We had some money January to March to administer, which we did. That money was all spent collectively across the city, which was great. And then I think in March, the Chancellor announced a second tranche of this money. The council agreed that they wanted to administer it in a similar way. So we've been asked to do this job again as lead and administer these grants. And then there is a strong indication that there will be a third tranche. I can't confirm that yet, but hopefully if there were, that would be a sort of autumn grant scheme, which would be really useful, because I think we all acknowledge that if things are tricky for families now in the summer, families and households in general, it is only likely to become worse towards the winter months. But this money is available from now through to the end of September, but it will only be available for as long as the money lasts. So if there's huge demand on it, it may run out before the end of September. So I think the advice is pretty sound to get applications in as quickly as possible. What is different is that the money has increased, so it's now £200 per household. But what is really good is if the household received a grant in round one, they are still eligible for a grant in round two. So we're leading on Edgbaston. There are 10 local leads for each of the 10 constituencies. So our focus is Edgbaston. The fund is available citywide to all households that are experiencing financial hardship, but there is also a criteria in place that they do need to receive means tested benefits. And the staff that are doing the applications have a list. So they can go through that list with people, but they do have to indicate the means tested benefit they're in receipt of, or they need to have an application in train. So they need to have applied for a means tested benefit. So it either needs to be having been applied for, or they need to be in receipt. And also it can include people with no recourse to public funds, which is good, because quite a lot of grants, as I'm sure you know, don't. So this households is a broad definition. So this is, there are actually 3 groupings of households. So there's families, there's working households, that could be maybe older people who've maybe got grown children, or it could be people without children. And then there's the over 65 age group. It's probably worth mentioning that we are being a little, because there's such an emphasis this time on the over 65s. I think it's because in the first round, they were the group that least took up the offer. I think that's for a range of reasons that we won't necessarily go into now, just for time. But I think one of the key things was that probably a lot of the promotion was done by social media. And I'm not for a minute saying that over 65s don't look at social media. I know lots of them do. But I think it's probably a way of promoting that maybe doesn't reach them as well as it reaches other age groups. So there's a real emphasis on the over 65 age group. And there is 40% of the money has been ring fenced for that age group. So we're really keen to try and reach them. And also the criteria has been eased for that age group. So actually over 65s just have to demonstrate that they're in financial hardship. So they need to be saying something like, I'm struggling to afford to buy food, or I'm struggling to pay my utility bills. So what's this money for? This is point 3. We've done this frequently asked questions sheet that I'll circulate to you after the end of this briefing. And I will also put it on our website where we put this recorded briefing so people can access it. So the money is for essentials. So that's food, that's energy and water costs. We've got a list here: sanitary products, toiletries, towards the cost of purchase of repairs to essential household items, or it could be for new items like white goods, fridge, freezers, cookers. And it could also be for things like essential transport costs. So it could be that people are struggling to afford the cost of maybe getting to work on public transport. Or I know in our area, in Edgbaston, we've got a lot of people in temporary accommodation. And something we come across a lot are families needing to travel out of the area to take children to school because they're in temporary accommodation, the children are still attending schools in other parts of the city. So quite often we find that parents are travelling with their children on public transport. So this money could be used to help with those costs as well. We recognise that this money is only a small amount. £200 isn't going to make a huge difference to families, households. I must stop saying families, households. It is going to hopefully give them some sort of short-term respite, but it isn't a long-term solution. And so we also have a responsibility to try and provide wraparound support. So, for example, with families, we can refer them into the local early help offer. With older people, we're working in partnership with Age UK, and it's just worth me mentioning that with the over 65 age group, we would try and refer them on to Age UK, and actually it would likely be Age UK that contacted them to do their application. And the reason for that is that Age UK have a broader range of support for that age group. And it's really important that we try and get that extra support and try and make this funding a more sustainable solution by having further support that people can tap into. So how do people apply? This is point 5. People need to either be referred by a community organisation. So, community groups could refer people to us, and I'll come on to how they do that. Or people can just refer themselves. They can contact us on our free phone number, and it's there, 0800 196 8856, or we have an email address as well. If it's a group contacting us, again, I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in a minute. We do have a specific email address for groups that are referring people to us. I'm sure you can imagine, but our main email address gets very, very busy, and our phone line gets very, very busy. And there is a wait. Most of the time, there is a wait because we're dealing with such high volumes. So the reason we set up the partners email address is just to hopefully be able to get to those referrals a little bit more quickly, and for them not to get lost in the general list of people contacting us. So I'll come on to that in a moment, but the email address for partners is hsfpartners@gatewayfs.org. So that's if partners are not wishing to log into the portal themselves, but they're wanting to pass referrals to us to deal with. What happens if people contact us directly, or if they're referred by a partner, is that they then receive a call back from one of our staff, and the member of staff will complete with them an application. It takes, I'm looking at Louise, it takes about sort of 13, 14, 15 minutes. So it's not all that long. And there are a series of questions that they go through, and it's all via a portal. Then that information goes to Birmingham Voluntary Services Council, who are the financial partner, and they administer a payment that goes into the individual's bank account. I'll just mention as well, we try really hard to pay it into bank accounts just because it's far more secure. It's a quick and easy way of people being able to access that money, but we do get that some people can't do that for a number of reasons, and in extenuating circumstances we will administer a cash payment. We need to be advised when a household needs a cash payment as quickly as possible, because we will need to do their application with them. And the sorts of reasons where we do a cash payment is that maybe the individual doesn't have access to their bank account, maybe there's been an element of coercion, and for some reason the bank account they had is no longer really in their control. Or it could be that they're recently arrived in the country, maybe a household that have no recourse to public funds and they haven't yet got a bank account. Or it could also be that they are significantly overdrawn and therefore the money wouldn't really be available to them. So if you have a household where the bank account is an issue, we can help, but it's really useful to talk to you and flag that as soon as possible. If people don't know if they live in Edgbaston or whether they live in one of the other constituencies, that's absolutely fine. One of the first steps we take is to go through a postcode checker, and that tells us where that household is located. If the household contact us on our free phone number or our email address, they will actually be asked to leave their postcode in the information they give us. So we can do a little check before we ring them. And obviously if they're not in Edgbaston, we can direct them to the lead organisation they need to speak to. I've talked about criteria. Yes, there is a criteria. There's the list of means tested benefits. How do I refer? Okay, so I've talked about how people refer themselves, but if partners wish to refer, there are the two options I've just gone through. You can either refer people to us. So for example, I'm thinking about your role. You've explained your work as part of the safeguarding team. You will have, I imagine, a caseload. And what you could do is you could pick people from your caseload that you think are going to be, would benefit from this grant. You would need to contact them and ask them if you can refer them. If they're in agreement, you could send us a list. And in that list, we need their name, we need their postcode, we need their age, and we need their telephone number. And then we would contact them. And you would send that list, or even just individuals. You could individually email us for individuals, and you'd send it to that email address, which is hsfpartners@gatewayfs.org. Or you can become a trusted partner, and that means that we can set you up with access to the portal. And I think you said that that's the option that you would prefer. How are the grants paid? I've covered that. They get paid into bank account. It's worthwhile mentioning to the household that at the start of the application, they will need to have their bank details with them, because we will be taking their sort code and their account number. If people have an issue with sharing their bank details with us, that just become a little bit of a problem, because we don't have any other way of paying the money to them. I've explained in extenuating circumstances, we will give a cash payment, but I'm afraid that it isn't a case of if somebody just is uncomfortable with us having access to their bank account, that wouldn't be classed as an extenuating circumstance. This grant is administered in this way. We've been discussing with a few partners about older people who do tend to be a little bit more cautious around sharing details, and I'm pleased they are cautious, because they need to be, and it's good that they are. There are details of our role as an administrator on our website, and obviously people can contact BVSC and double check that we are who we say we are, which is a good option if people are a little bit nervous. But obviously if they go to BVSC's website, or if they go to the council's website, they will explain that the grant is administered in this way, straight into bank accounts. Households don't have to have the full £200, they can have less. I'm looking at Louisa again, but I don't think many people have had less than £200. And to be honest, people should really be encouraged to apply for the £200, because there is no way of them coming back a second time. So say they have 150, there's no way that they can come back and have the remaining £50. So I think my advice would be, I'm sure there are ways of them spending the £200. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn there, but I would be strongly advising them to accept the full amount. If people are experiencing financial hardship, I think the full £200 would be more useful to them. How long will it take to apply and get the grant? Well, that is a little bit variable depending on how busy things are. At the moment, we've got a waiting list of probably 3 or 4 days. That may go into 5, depending how busy we become. And then I know that BVSC are also saying it can take them up to 5 days to administer the payment. So it's not a quick process, I'm afraid, and that is down to volume. It could be, therefore, that it could take, I think this is probably a bit of an outside, and hopefully it's more of a worst case scenario, but I think it could take up to about 10 days, 10 working days. Might applications be rejected? Yes, they might. And that would be if there are things like duplications. People can only apply for this fund once. And so the system has been set up to seek out duplications. So the system will flag if a phone number has been used before, if a bank account has been used before, or if a postcode has been used before. And Louise is going to mention in a moment a particular issue that we have in Edgbaston. But we, as I've said before, we have lots of families in temporary accommodation. So we have quite a lot of shared addresses. And now there is a way around that, and we'll talk about that briefly when I hand over to Louisa. But that's only really something you need to be aware of if you are physically doing the applications. I think that is pretty much it. So what if your own, right, yeah, this is just something that I'll just skim over very, very briefly. We recognise with groups, with community groups, you may well have volunteers or members of staff that qualify for this fund. And obviously they should be encouraged to apply. The best thing you can do is contact us if you have a volunteer or a member of staff that would like to apply to the Edgbaston scheme, and we will do the application for you. It's just for transparency. In confidence, you would let us have the details of the volunteers and the staff members, and we would do the application for you. We would not advise any organisation to process applications from their own volunteers or staff.